as well. Let's take a look at what's going on in the papers this weekend, the main headlines. Joining me, we've got Albie Amankona, political commentator, and Professor Scott Lucas, also political commentator and professor at the University College Dublin. Good afternoon to you both.
Hello.
OK, I'm going to kick off with one story. We're going to play a game, guys. We're going to play a game. Guess who I'm talking about in this story? OK, so I love how this reads. Lancashire Police have said it has issued a 42-year-old man from London with a conditional offer of a fixed penalty. Who am I talking about?
I think it could be our very own Prime Minister.
Oh,
Rishi Sunak.
we need to get a prize for
Do I win?
Albie, you win. You've won.
Thank you.
I just love how this is written. Lancashire Police have issued a 42-year-old man with a fixed penalty.
Who could it possibly be?
Who could it be? Who could it be? It's extraordinary. OK, so this was supposed to be a good week. There was a significant... We're talking... Oh gosh, billions, around £4 billion distributed around the UK, and particularly in those areas where they've promised to level up, to put money up in the north, northwest, northeast, and that's what he was talking about. And yet, I'm not sure what exactly he said because he didn't have a seatbelt on.
Well, this story rather has kind of got ahead of itself with this whole seatbelt issue. He's actually been issued a fixed penalty notice by the police force up in Lancashire when he was doing a video, I think it was. But ultimately, the question is, do we think the public are really bothered about this fixed penalty notice? It's not a Partygate fixed penalty notice. It's someone in a car without a seatbelt on. How many people have been in similar situations where they just haven't had a seatbelt on for a couple of minutes and not got a fixed penalty notice? We've seen lots of pictures emerging of other leaders.
Would they have had to pay? If somebody was caught without a seatbelt, there's a chance they would have to pay.
But the point is that there are lots of other pictures of political leaders in the past without seatbelts on. I've seen pictures of Tony Blair, of Jeremy Corbyn, of Ed Miliband. You know, no one was kicking up a fuss then. Why are we kicking up a fuss now? Scott, there seems to be a different way of treating Tory politicians and Labour politicians, and I think that's one of the things that are getting, particularly people on the centre-right, a little bit upset about this
Scott,
story.
What do you think?
Oh, mate, look, you know, if Keir Starmer if Keir Starmer appeared without a seatbelt in a video, trust me, Labour politicians would treat it just the same or even worse than Tory politicians.
There is a video. There's a video of Keir without a seatbelt.
Let's knock this one for six, son. I agree with Albie on the starting point, which is that there are far more serious things that have happened in the recent past. We could talk about a former prime minister who broke the law repeatedly over coronavirus regulations. We could talk about
only fined and only found to have criminally broken the law.
But still broke the law.
Once. And also our current prime minister as well, actually.
Still broke the law. Our current prime minister was fined for breaking the law over coronavirus. Our former prime minister's chief of staff went on a self-administered eye test at Barnard Castle, you might remember, breaking coronavirus regulations. So, I mean, that's
Scott,
what's quite
Let's
serious.
let our viewers decide for themselves, you know, how much of an issue this was. Let's watch the video where Rishi Sunak got himself in trouble. Let's take a look.
One of my New Year's promises to you was to grow the economy, and today we're announcing the second round of allocations from our Levelling Up Fund. And that's about investing in local areas in order to create jobs and help deliver on that promise to boost growth. In total, we're announcing over £2 billion of funding, and that's going to go to support projects across 100 different local communities around the UK. Now, I'm out and about seeing Levelling Up in action all across the...
Scott, do you think people would really care about the fact our Prime Minister isn't wearing a seatbelt? You know, Albie's making a decent point. I'm pretty sure there's probably other politicians, maybe members of the royal family that don't wear seatbelts. Is it much of a big of a deal here?
I'm sure the story's gone by next week. I mean, the fact is, it's just like, remember the story of Rishi Sunak not knowing how to use a debit card. Or not knowing how actually to pay for petrol. You know, the fact is that this is sort of fluff. It's media fluff. Where it might have an impact, and I will emphasize mine, is if it's one of a series of stories which basically betrays the idea that when Sunak took office, he said, look, we're going to hold ourselves to the highest level of accountability and the highest level of standards. And I think we're about to talk about another story, which involves another Tory politician involving millions of pounds. which raises that question of accountability and transparency. So I actually agree with Albie. I don't think it's that serious a story, but I think the wider mood music about a government which was supposed to get away from all the negligence and indeed, one might argue, sleaze.
Go on, let's look at that then. I was going to look at Labour and claims of it, the party being sexist. Let's quickly look at Nadeem Zahawi, Albie. This isn't going away for him. Over the summer, there were same questions over his tax affairs, and it turns out there's a very good chance that he paid money to HMRC. The details as to why he was paying, was it a fine, was it a tax that he didn't pay in the first place? It's all just being looked into right now, but it's not a good look, is it?
No, it's definitely not a good look. You know, this government, when Rishi Sunak came into power after the disaster, that was Liz Truss and all of the problems that the Boris Johnson government saw with Partygate. Rishi Sunak came into power with about integrity, accountability, responsibility, professionalism, only to be mired with another scandal. You know, the first one, I guess you would probably argue, was around Suella Braverman being reappointed as Home Secretary after he stood down for breaking the ministerial code. And now we are seeing Tory ministers going out on television having to defend another Tory politician, Nadeem Zahawi, who is the party chairman, who is seen to be wrapped up in some sort of tax affairs scandal. I think it's important to note that as far as HMRC are concerned, the issue has been resolved, the tax has been paid, the penalty has also been paid. So actually, in terms of tax received by the Exchequer, they're actually up because of the penalty that's been paid, which is a good thing. But ultimately, this is not a good look for the government.
He faced a penalty. The fact that he did it, and this isn't the first time the Tory party has the Prime Minister, his own wife, issues over no laws were broken, but issues over the fact that she wasn't paying tax when she could have done, and now she is paying tax. But let me read out the statement from Nadeem Zahawi. We finally heard from him today. As you say, Tory party chairman Nadeem Zahawi has said an error in his tax affairs was accepted by HMRC as having been careless and not deliberate. In a statement, he said he wanted to address confusion about his finances after claims he tried to avoid tax and had to pay it back. He's gone on to say that he had chosen to settle the matter and pay what they said was due, which was the right thing to do. Does this wrap things up for you, Scott?
Oh, because there's a whole series of questions. First of all, let's explain the extent of his mistake, if he wants to call it that. The initial penalty, or the initial tax that was due was £3.7 million. Now, for that amount of tax to be due, it meant that Nadeem Zahawi either underreported or did not report £27 million in capital gains. That's a pretty significant mistake. But, and this is where it gets more serious, last summer, Nadeem Zahawi issued a series of misleading statements about his connection with an offshore trust named Offshore Investments. That has not been cleared up. Last summer, Nadeem Zahawi said, even as the investigation was starting, that reports of an investigation were smears. That was not true. Last summer, as the investigations were starting, Nadeem Zahawi's lawyers threatened legal action against anyone who reported about it, including the Independent on Sunday and an independent tax analyst who was covering the story. He only began to negotiate for the settlement with HMRC after the stories broke last summer. So the issue now is not that he paid the tax and the penalty now, that he's now clear. The issue is that he was not transparent and accountable, and indeed arguably tried to evade that in a critical period last summer, when, of course, he had been the Chancellor and was about to take up a new post under the Truss and then Sunak government.
OK. I'm going to have to leave it. No time to talk about Labour apparently being sexist. Darn it. Anyway, I'll try and fill it in the show later on. But Professor Scott Lucas and Albie Amankona, am I saying? Amankona, excuse me. I'll keep getting the names wrong. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you very much. And well done for winning the game. Got a prize for you, Albie. Got a prize. After the break.